I travelled to Seoul to visit some of the most viral, famous Korean cafes and see if the reality matches up to the expectation. Okay, well I didn't go all the way to Korea just for that, but it was still part of my trip. So come with me, let's sip the sips and nibble the nibbles, and we'll rate each of these famous cafes based on their food, drinks, aesthetics, and then at the end we'll rank them all to see which cafes are worth the visit. So the first famous aesthetic cafe on our hit list was Cafe Mooni. With its feminine but modern design and plethora of cutesy pastries, this was one of the ones I was most excited for because if it was good, it could be really great. But I was also scared because it had such an intense capacity for cuteness that if it was bad, it could crush me. It was also the first cafe we went to on our trip, so it would kind of set the baseline for the rest of our reviews. Cafe Mooni is located in the Apgujeong area, which is home to a bunch of famous cafes, including a few that I wanted to include in this video but was unable to get into. I'm looking at you, London Bagel Museum, who had a line snaking around the block multiple times I tried to go there and even was so full that they cut the line off at one point. Anyway, back to Cafe Mooni. Upon arriving, it was just as gorgeous as I had expected, with a photogenic exterior and a pile of pastries near the entryway that really set the scene. Not going to lie, at this point I was very excited. It really was picture perfect and I was overwhelmed trying to decide what little treat to choose from the pile. We ended up going for an Earl Grey Cruffin, as it seemed like they had a few different Cruffin flavors, which kind of indicated that like Cruffins were like a thing that they did. And then I got an Einspanner coffee and my boyfriend got an iced Americano, which is like the #1 coffee beverage in Korea. And we quickly found a seat in what was like a huge 3-story complex cafe with multiple branching off wings, and it was packed with people. And shortly after we got seated, our order was ready. So an Einspanner is sort of like a sweet flavored coffee that was trending in Seoul while we were there. It's like a short iced black coffee with a sweet whipped creamy layer on top. It was my first time having one and I really liked it. It's a little bit more indulgent than my typical unsweetened cappuccino or latte, but this one had a really nice balance between the bitter and the sweet, and it was a really nice like compact size. I did end up having another Einspanner latte later on in the trip, but I think this one was quite a bit better in my opinion. The Cruffin was also a pleasant surprise. They had some more novelty items, but I wanted to test something a little bit more simple, and this was very well executed with a gentle Earl Grey tea flavour in the cream. It was light and fluffy and easily shared between me and my BF, who we will now all thank for being an additional mouth to allow me to sample more little treats on the trip. Thank you, boyfriend. Speaking of boyfriend, he said his iced Americano was good. Not amazing, not horrendous, but good. Like, yeah, good. We also had a little snoop around and they did have a very pretty rooftop area which actually looked quite lovely as well. It had little umbrellas and plenty of seating. I also can't stress enough how huge this cafe was. Like I think it was easily the biggest cafe I think I've ever been to and the largest one we went to on this trip. Overall, we're off to a very positive start. The food was like a solid 3.5, nothing amazing but pretty yummy and decent value. The drinks were a 4. At the time I was quite positive, but looking back, having tried the other ones, I think this was some of the nicer kind of coffee beverages we had. For aesthetic, I also have to give it a 4. It was very pretty and everything basically looked like a Pinterest board, but because it was such a huge space, it somewhat lacked a little bit of that like coziness vibe that you might look for in a cafe. So this was a cafe which I had heard of but didn't realize that it was the cafe that it was when we went, because it temporarily changed its name from Dosan Mama to Mamma Mia Cafe, which I thought was just like a cute name, but it was in fact the Mamma Mia Cafe. This was a spontaneous visit. We were just staying in the area and looking for a cafe to get a little morning bite at, and honestly this was not my top choice, but everything else was so busy and we had a train to catch, so we decided we would go here, not realizing how thorough the theming would be. This one was surprisingly gorgeous. When we visited, it had this really vibrant, colorful entryway of fresh flowers, like a big table set up out the front. And then when we went in, it had a really gorgeous setup of all the baked goods. And just as an FYI, pretty much every cafe in Korea had this sort of tong and tray style self-service setup. They had a really nice assortment of items from savory to sweet, and even like some fruit and yogurty kind of options. Some of which were more like Mamma Mia themed, because it was a Mamma Mia cafe. We were quickly realizing this was a Mamma Mia themed cafe, like literally. And this is one of the places where I was like really tossing up between multiple things, but we ended up getting a savory tomato and onion basil kind of croissant sandwich and a pistachio bun. At this point, we went upstairs to find a seat and realized it was like very literal Mamma Mia themed. Afterwards, I did some research and realized that the Korean run of the Mamma Mia musical was on, so I believe this was like a cute promotional tie-in for that. Anyway, time to rank the little treats. First, we cut into the savory, which they called an onion bun, but it was sort of like a flaky croissant-y kind of dealio that had what I assume is an onion cream cheese, and then some roasted tomatoes, I think, and basil. Biting into this one was quite surprising. The pastry was light and flaky, but then the filling was like really flavorful and substantial. We were sharing both the pastries, but I could have easily destroyed one of these on my own. The coffee here was just fine. Like, not bad, but not great. I ordered a vanilla latte and it was personally a little too sweet for me. I know it's kind of my own fault, like I ordered a sweet coffee, I got a sweet coffee, but I do just think it was unbalanced compared to other ones I've had. My boyfriend got a regular latte, I think, and he also thought it was fine, nothing to rave about. So I was quite impressed by the first pastry, so I was kind of keen to bite into this pistachio bun, and I'm not a huge pistachio girly, but like I appreciate the flavor. But even saying that, I felt this was a bit lackluster and not one I would recommend. It was just a little bit disappointing, especially since the first pastry was really good. Again, the vibes of this cafe were so lush with all the color and the decorations. It felt cozy, but still actually had a lot of cute opportunities for photos. Again, this one was not on my hit list to visit, but I actually think I got the cutest Instagram photos from here. Overall for food, it's getting a 3. One pastry that was very good, one that was quite bad, kind of works out to a 3 in my eyes. In terms of drinks, they were a bit average, so 2.5. And for aesthetics, I just think it was really gorgeously decorated. There were plenty of cute opportunities for an aesthetic picky, but it was also comfy. And I would have happily spent more time hanging out there. The Mamma Mia theming is a choice, but I've actually seen pictures of what it looks like when it's not Mamma Mia themed, like it's normal theming, which also looks very pretty, just like kind of a vibrant cottagey vibe, which is obviously a little bit more timeless and versatile than like the specific Mamma Mia theming. So the regular theming could probably be a full 5. I rate this Meryl approved ? Because I could not contact her in time to publish the video for her comment, but it's a very well executed themed cafe in my opinion, and typically the more themed a cafe is, the worse everything else is. But this was pretty decent. And also, in case you're wondering, they did not play any ABBA music at all. So Anthracite coffee is kind of a bonus round because I didn't actually try any food there, but I wanted to mention it regardless because I'd seen it mentioned as one of the best coffee places in Seoul. Anthracite has a few different locations, but we visited the Hanam location, which is near Itaewon. And first impressions, it had a very well done minimalist vibe. They had this digital screen worked into the kind of counter. Full disclosure, I had just destroyed a gigantic chicken sandwich before coming here, so I was not in the mood to try one of the little pastries, but I kind of regret it because they do seem quite up my alley. But this place is most well known for their coffee and their roastery. They also retail beans for sale, and as a marketing girly, I just want to say I think the packaging and the brand design is very slay. I'll be honest, I don't actually feel like the coffee here was super memorable for me. I believe I got like an iced vanilla latte. It was kind of like a staple on the menus in Seoul, which isn't something that's like a big thing here as a dedicated menu item. Like you can order a latte with vanilla syrup, but it's never like listed on the menu as vanilla latte here at least. So I remember thinking it was good. It was an iced latte with like a little twist of sweet vanilla, but nothing like memorable. And in hindsight, I think it's just because the coffee here was actually just very similar to the coffee experience we've had in Australia. Like it didn't feel very different because it was quite similar to what we're used to. My BF, who actually used to work in a specialty coffee place, believes this was one of the better coffees we had on the trip. And I would say out of all the options in this video, this is the most specialty coffee place. If you're used to Australian style coffee culture and want something like that, then you'll probably like this. Overall, I can't rate the food, but the coffee is very good. Not the best coffee I've ever had in my life, but it deserves its flowers at a 4.5. The brutalist concrete vibe is well executed, but it's also quite simple. The greenery centerpiece was a really nice touch. But I'm personally like not that obsessed / impressed with the more barren vibes. It's cool, but I'm just not that girly. And since this is my personal opinion and my personal ranking, I'm gonna leave it as a 3. Overall, I would describe it as women who shit, because the vibes give like cool girl and the coffee gives strong bowel movements. So Cafe Laird is touted as one of the more famous and trendy cafes that is a must visit, being a fairy tale-like vibe of an idyllic British bakery and tea house, with cottagecore energy ripped straight out of Pinterest with rustic baked goods piled high on heirloom plates. We visited the Bukchon location. There are a couple of other locations as well, I think. And when there's multiple locations, I tend to have higher expectations because like there's a few of them. People must like them. They must be good. I loved the exterior with like the buttery yellow color and the goofy little bear drawing. It was very charming and it had a warm, homey vibe to it that I was quite keen on. After heading on in, the vibe didn't stop and there was a large table laden with primarily scones in different flavours. The theme of Cafe Laird is essentially England, or British. The interior was not overly big. It was one of the smaller cafes we visited and it was quite packed, but once we grabbed a table, I picked up a couple of the scones as that seemed to be their signature, and we both got a hot drink. And I'm going to address this now, but this is what I would describe as an American style scone. Just the way that it's shaped and the fact that it's flavoured. It's like the scones that you see in Starbucks, compared to what I would say is like a traditional British scone that is usually plain or sometimes has raisins and it's kind of small and rounded. And they did actually have them there. They were like the original scones. Those are the kind that you usually serve with like jam and cream, whereas these were like self-contained entities of what I was hoping would be tasty carbiness. I don't actually care that they're not like traditional scones. I think Americanized scones have merit. It's just like funny in that way. Anyway, the Earl Grey quote unquote scone was first taste tested by my boyfriend, who provided this insightful commentary.
That's ash.
I think I'm a little bit easy to please, and as I was eating it, I thought it was actually fine, but as you can see, I did not think it was a scone.
It's like a muffin. I like it. Like a muffin.
In hindsight, I think I was being very glass half full on that one. I was being a little bit generous, I think. You know, I go to these places hoping they're going to be good, so there's like some over-optimism there. Then we dug into the pretzel butter scone, which you can see has a little pat of butter in the middle and then like a crispy golden pretzel top. Now again, if we view this as a muffin or like the American style scone, which is sort of like a biscuity muffin hybrid, it's pretty good. It's all right. It's a little sweet, a little salty on the top, and the creaminess of the butter means it suffers less from the dryness issue. Then we come to our drinks. First off, adorable mugs. I love the little dog. He's such a rascal. I believe once again my boyfriend got a non-noteworthy latte, but I, in my infinite 2 brain cell wisdom, thought I should get a tea because they had a bunch of teas on the menu. It's a British cafe. I was really missing my regular cups of tea with milk. I don't have a video of me drinking this because I think I was very sad. But as you can see, that is a cup of black tea. And I remember when I ordered it, I tried my best to ask about milk at the counter, and the guy was like, yes, but then it didn't like come with milk, and then I was awkward and I chickened out because I just felt bad because it's like my fault that I couldn't communicate that in Korean and it's like not anyone else's fault. You know, just like the classic travel language barrier awkwardness. Anyway, it was just expensive and not good, and I should have just stuck to coffee or something else, but I just thought since it was like a British cafe and they had tea that it would be like British style tea, but I was wrong. So yeah. Overall, I had high hopes for later, but I felt this one was pretty overrated. Again, there are a few different locations, so maybe the other one is better, but I don't know. The food, I can't really give higher than a 2.5. Please understand that I tried 2 items. Maybe the cakes are better, but considering how many different varietals of scones they had, I figured scones were the thing, and I don't think the scones are the thing. The drinks, my boyfriend's coffee was serviceable and my tea was bad. I kind of feel like it's partially my fault, but it was also like $8 Australian for this cup of tea. So I feel like I have to give it like a 1.5. It was not good. And aesthetic wise, I quite liked the decorations and the vibes were homey and cozy. It was quite noisy inside because it was really busy. I didn't want to film people's faces and stuff as they were enjoying their afternoon, but the rest of the cafe, which you didn't see, was quite like nondescript basic tables and chairs, like very simple cottage vibes. So overall, I would give it like a 3.5. Overall, I just kind of felt like a silly sausage. Maybe I goofed up on the ordering, but typically if you're going to order 4 items, you're not really expecting for them to all be subpar. Honestly, I'm a little sad about this one. Next up is Seol Won, which is a cafe that describes itself as being inspired by Japanese aesthetics, with a little bit different fare than what we've tried so far, less European inspired bakery goods and more Asian style desserts like milk puddings, castellas, and more traditional inspired flavors. The cafe was this beautiful renovated 4-story house in Mangwon, which is a little bit less of a touristy area, and I 100% owe this recommendation to my lovely friend Grace, who is living in Seoul and suggested this cafe for us to hang out at together. She's a sweet bean and she also has a YouTube channel with her partner Aaron. It is very slay. This cafe had a really nice selection of treats and we took quite a while to decide because they all looked so good, but we ended up settling on a little set they were doing, which was a mugwort flavored castella cake, which came with cream, butter and red bean, and a milk pudding as well as our drinks. I believe Grace's was a blackberry lemonade or something along those lines. I very much considered ordering that, but I decided to opt instead for the brown sugar iron spanner because I wanted to try another version of an iron spanner. The presentation was gorgeous and we sat cross-legged on these tatami mats, which were very relaxing. We are silly goofy gals and I actually hadn't anticipated visiting such a slay cafe, but as soon as we arrived, I was like, I should probably get some shots of this. Like, I feel like I'll regret it if I don't. But also the girls were girling and goofing, you feel me? First we tried the castella. It was light, fluffy, slightly sweet, and it had this sort of fun, herbaceous taste of mugwort, which if you didn't know is like a traditional Korean medicinal herb. It was fun to like have it on its own and then mix it with like the different sides that it came with. It was very different to a lot of the other offerings at the cafes I'd visited so far, and I really appreciated it being different. The milk pudding was quite simple. It was just like a milk in pudding form, but it was also quite yummy. Not too sweet. I enjoyed it. My iron spanner was not bad, but not as good as the first one I had. This one was brown sugar flavored, but I would say it was like a little too sweet for me. I don't know, it was just like very big, so it was like a lot of sugar, whereas I feel like if they made like a smaller one, maybe that would be better. Maybe it's just me, I don't know. It wasn't bad, but for my personal preference, I would not order it again. Overall, the food was beautiful, tasty, and I would rate that at like a 4.5. They're kind of playing a different ball game to a lot of the other cafes we're talking about, but both things that we ate were very yummy and well executed, which is more than I can say for a lot of other places in this video. Drinks are more average, I would rate them out of 3. Aesthetic wise, I would give it like a 3.5. They go for the traditional tatami dark wood aesthetic and it looks good. It's pretty simple but decently executed, and comfort isn't a factor that we have on this list, but we chilled out there on the big pillows chatting for quite a few hours, so props for functioning as a nice hangout location. I had a really good time, but also not every cafe has my friend Grace in it. This one is also in a less touristy area and it's not as like TikTok tourist famous as some of the other ones, so it's a little bit more of a hidden gem. Overall, I would say Girls' Day Slay.
Beep, 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 beep. Like the...
Now, last but not least, Cafe Onion was the most recommended cafe I'd seen across my social media while I was planning my trip. There was rarely a TikTok of must-visit cafes in Seoul that didn't include it. Now, there are multiple different locations with a lot of people referencing the Anguk location for having a traditional Hanok aesthetic, but I ended up visiting the one in Seongsu on my lonesome because my boyfriend and I had different flights home. The vibe is similar to Anthracite, going for more of the minimalistic pared down vibe, which I respect, but also it's kind of hard to judge because it is so minimal. There's just not a lot of stuff there. There was a big table with all the goodies lined up on it. Then they also had this, which I believe is called the Pandoro. It is their signature sweet. And I just didn't feel confident that I could conquer this one on my own, and I kind of didn't want to. So I opted for a smaller, more achievable strawberry tart, and I believe an iced cafe latte. And can I just say, there was something about this iced latte, the color, the presentation, the vibe, it just really appealed to me. It was like the perfect ratio and the caramelly color, and it was just actually really good and hit the spot. The strawberry pastry was, look, in this footage I seem kind of mixed on it, but it was just very underwhelming. The pastry wasn't particularly nice, custardy cream was giving generic store-bought mix, and the strawberries were also like a little soft and mushy. I don't know, it just wasn't great. I realize this isn't their signature product, but just after hearing all the praise about the cafe in general, this felt like a bit of a letdown. Anyway, after sipping up the rest of my iced coffee and then promptly visiting the bathroom, I explored the rest of the cafe, which had big windows, lots of greenery, and a rooftop which was very hot as it was a particularly sunny day when I visited. I thought it was a little underwhelming aesthetically, but I did appreciate the variety of seating options and space. So overall, Cafe Onion is a little bit of an interesting spot. The food was some of the worst I had. Again, I only had one item, but I'd probably have to give it a 2 out of 5. I did consider not finishing it. It was not great. The coffee was delicious. Admittedly, I only had the one I had and I was alone to judge, but I would give it a 4 out of 5. And then the aesthetic I would say is maybe like a 2.5 out of 5. I think the Anthracite location we visited was a very similar vibe, but it did it a little bit more stylishly. This just felt a little bit less thought out. And overall, I would say retrograde day, because I kind of feel like the stars were just a little bit misaligned on this visit. Like some things were surprisingly really good, others were surprisingly bad. It just felt a little inconsistent, and because I only went off the 2 things I had, I feel like there would be enough potential that I would give it another chance, but that's kind of how I feel about it at the moment. So where do all of these famous cafes rank? Now, while I feel like I went to a bunch, I did only really scratch the surface of all the amazing cafes in Korea, so we're going to keep it to a smaller ranking selection. And also, I've only been to all of these once, so anything lower than C tier, even for a subpar experience, feels a little harsh. I'm taking Anthracite out of the running because I didn't try the food, but I would say if you're looking for good quality barista-made coffee that's not overly sweet, then this would be on my recommendations list. Plus, they have a few different locations, so it's worth adding to your map for a pick-me-up pit stop. So then, I have to say, I can't in good faith recommend Cafe Layered. Nothing about this place was stand out, and again, there's a chance I missed something, but if a friend asked me, which one trendy aesthetic Korean cafe should I visit in Seoul, there is just no way I would recommend this one at this point, so it's gonna go in the C tier. Then this one was overhyped but had good coffee and actually really friendly staff as well. It's Cafe Onion. I feel like the food was a little bit of a miss, but I feel like I was just unlucky with my choice. So for me, it's going in the B tier. Then the aesthetics of the Dosan Mama Cafe were so gorgeous, but the food and drinks were a little inconsistent. In saying that, I think the savory pastry I ate here was one of my favorites of any of the cafes in this video, so I'm actually going to put it in the A tier. I feel like it was an unplanned win, and I think if I slightly switched up the menu choice, then this could have potentially been in the S tier. And then I was kind of tossing it up, but I think both Seol Won and Cafe Mooni are landing in the S tier. And if you're traveling to Seoul and you want to visit a cute cafe, I think these two are the ones I would probably recommend. Now, Seol Won, this had a bit more of a chill vibe. A lot of cafes have super loud music playing, so it's really nice for a cozy hangout, and the food and drinks were unique and tasty tasty and it wasn't super overcrowded even on a weekend. And then S tier, I have to say, Cafe Mooni. Surprisingly, the first cafe we visited on the trip, and as we visited more cafes, I ended up really comparing them back to this one. We did only have one pastry, but it was really nice, and the drinks were nicely done as well. I think this place has a really good balance, and it's a good example of an aesthetic cafe because everything looks good and it's a beautiful place to be in, but you're not sacrificing a decent little treat and coffee as a result. This one is really for the girlies, and it is in a really great location for a really fun day. So that's it. These are all the famous Seoul cafes ranked. Let me know what you think and which one you would want to visit. And let me know if I need to go back to try more for scientific reasons. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!